Hey, what's up guys, and welcome to Saboteur, the top range DPS AoE spec for rogues currently. There's a couple different variations of this build, however we're going to go over the 54 Saboteur 22 Blade Dancer version today. This is going to be a 2-button spec, so it's very simple to play and very competitive. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about what the soul tree point breakdown looks like. You can see I told you before we have the 54 Saboteur and the 22 Blade Dancer here. We'll start with Blade Dancer. We go up the right side here for 10% dexterity, 10% finisher increase, 10% combo point generating ability increase, 15% increase on crit, as well as a 5% reduction in damage, and then the two major points, which are blade tempo and blade hustle, which blade hustle will increase the duration by 3 seconds of blade tempo, making it increase the damage by 30% for 18 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. So this build can be very, very bursty from the start. So moving over to Saboteur, I won't go over all the abilities, but I will tell you there are a couple of ones in here that are pretty obvious that you shouldn't take. Just go ahead and take a look at this breakdown and build it like this at first. If you want to test a couple of things and swap some points around, please feel free to do so. However, I do recommend you try this out first. So moving over to the right here, level 61 and 62 masteries aren't very important as usual. However, I do usually take aggressive defense for the absorb shield, and 62 I take revitalize for the 3% incoming healing buff. So moving up to 63, I take Sprinter's Guile, gives you a 10% increase in unmounted movement speed. Moving up to 64, I take Even Strikes for the flat damage increase of 7%. As a negative, it does also reduce your chance to crit by 4%, but you do get that secondary ability there too, which basically when your charges are still on a mob and it dies, it transfers it into some passive damage there based on your weapon damage plus 25% per charge on the enemy. So can be a decent extra chunk of DPS there. Moving up to 65, I always usually recommend a planar variation type of skill just because it can be a powerful DPS cooldown or healing cooldown. Planar variation is unique in that it also is affected by your blade tempo. So at the end of that 18 seconds there during your AoE rotation, you can pop your planar variation to sort of extend the duration of your blade tempo, but I'll show you more about that when we get into the rotation section. So now that we talked about the masteries, let's go ahead and talk about macros real quick. We'll start at the top. This is going to be one of your CC abilities. It's Adhesive Bomb. It's an AoE snare. If you've seen my other videos, I use a lot of GTAE modifiers just because I'm not a fan of manually placing AoEs like this. I usually find a target that I want to hit and I will put it on them. If you do want to manage this part separately, as always, please feel free to do so. But I really like the GTAE modifiers here. So moving on down, we have the Carpet Bombing macro, which is literally the same as the Spam macro, except for it has Carpet Bombing in the top. More on that later. Moving on down, this is going to be the Spam macro. I did tell you this is a 2-button spec. The main 2 buttons that you're going to be worrying about are going to be your Carpet Bombing macro and your Spam macro. So moving on down here a little bit, we have our Choking Gas Bomb macro. The Choking Gas Bomb will debilitate your enemy for 8 seconds. This is a really important part of Saboteur because when you are clearing trash in raids, most of the time you're going to need some sort of crowd control ability, and this is where the Choking Gas Bomb comes in. Moving on down to Incriminate, this will transfer all threat you generate to the target that you incriminate. Usually this is reserved for tanks. Moving on over to the right here, my last macro is a single target macro, which may look very similar to the Spam macro. However, there are a few abilities that are swapped out. Like for instance, Detonate is a single target detonate, whereas in the Spam macro you have the AoE version of that. And at the bottom here you can see we have Spike Charge, that's the single target charge, whereas Caltrop Charge would be your AoE version. So minor differences there. So now we talked about the macros, and I'll go ahead and include those in a video as well, but now that we've talked about those, let's talk about the buffs and what's on the bar. We only have one buff with this build as it comes from Assassin and it is Virulent Poison. If you keep on moving down, we have Fragmentation Bomb and Spike Bomb. These are both going to be in your macro. However, I keep them here to monitor their cooldown because this build doesn't have any K alerts. There's nothing really worth monitoring. But if you come down here, you can monitor these 2 right here. Moving over to the right a little bit, you can see I have both of the charges here. Caltrop Charge is on my Q keybind. This is going to be the charge that you'll use for AoE. And Spike Charge is going to be on my E keybind, which is the charge that you'll use for single target. If you go one more to the right, you'll see I have my Blade Tempo on the R key. Blade Tempo is going to be a very useful skill in that it's going to really dramatically increase your burst in the beginning of the fight. So moving on down to the bottom, we have our Spam macro on 1. We have the Carpet Bombing macro on 2. I have my Incriminate on 3, and it's also set up as a mouse over. I don't know if you noticed that in the macro. That way I can just hover the mouse key the mouse cursor over the name and hit Incriminate, and it'll incriminate that person versus having to actually target them. Over to the right a little further, we see we have the Choking Gas Bomb here, Planar Variation on our 5 key, Adhesive Bomb on the 6 key, Enfeebling Trap. Enfeebling Trap is unique, usually used mostly in PvP, although I don't really PvP with this spec anymore as of Nightmare Tide, but you can plop it down on your location, and if somebody runs through it, it'll stun them for 4 seconds. So pretty cool stuff. It can also work on some trash as well, so it has limited uses, but the one main problem with it is without taking the trap point in your soul tree, you can't target cast it. It has to be cast at your location. So moving over to the right, you can see we got the standard break free here. We also have our single target macro on the 0 key, and if you watched my guides before, you know that my 0 key is mapped to my middle click, so that's why it's on the 0 key there. And then of course we have this is my racial passive for being an F, which is a 50% move speed buff that doesn't work in dungeons or raids. So pretty simple as far as the bar setup goes, nothing too crazy there. So now let's talk about how this rotation looks here for a second. It's relatively easy to do, very simple. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to start by loading up your target with Caltrop Charge. I usually try and pick a target that's in the center to make sure that all the targets are covered. So you're going to hit that 5 times to make sure you have the 5 charges. You can see them right up here. Now that we have the 5 charges here, if it starts ticking down to like say 20 seconds or so, you can refresh that by just throwing one more Caltrop Charge on there. So now that you're all prepped up and ready to go, the first thing you're going to do to start the fight is hit your blade tempo, and then you're going to hit your macro, your spam macro. The idea here is that you want to hit your spam macro enough times to put these 2 abilities right here on cooldown 3 times. After the 3rd time is when you're going to start using your carpet bombing macro. So to start this out, again, we're going to make sure we got the 5 stacks. We're going to hit blade tempo, and then we're going to start spamming our 1 key. You can see both of these abilities just went on cooldown, and we're going to keep going until we see them go on cooldown one more time. Blade tempo has 7 seconds left here. They just went on it for the 2nd time, and we're at 1 second, so we're going to go ahead and catch the end of that blade tempo and then keep spamming. Now they're both on cooldown. Immediately move to your 2 key and spam it until your spike charge goes on cooldown, and then go back to your 1 key. You can see now we're pulling in the neighborhood of 290 or so, 280, 290. And at this point, you're going to keep spamming your 1 key continuously, and you're going to use your carpet bombing macro off cooldown just the way we did before. We're going to spam it 3 times to hit spike bomb 3 times, and then you're going to go back to your 1 key to get off your frag bomb again. You're also going to be using your planar variation off of cooldown, and also blade tempo off of cooldown. So you can see I'm literally just hitting this 1 key here, and we're still pulling 260 or so. So really competitive numbers for not that great a gear. The gear will be at the end of the video, so you can kind of compare yourself to where I'm at in this video. As I stated before, you can manage all of these abilities by themselves if you do not prefer to use macros. However, with 2-button Saboteur, it's actually very effective for not having to manage all those abilities, you know. So I use the 2-button Sab spec just because most of the time when I use this is going to be in a raid clearing trash, and the numbers aren't as important as just downing the trash. But it's totally up to you, whatever you want to do. You can see after a minute 30 we're still holding 250. After about 5 minutes we'll probably settle in nice and snugly in the 240 range or so. But it does really well. But that's pretty much it, guys. The single target version of this is relatively easy. You just pick yourself a target here. Let me go ahead and clear my parser here. Well, it's not going to clear, but so you come over to your target and you hit your E key to put your spike charge. You want to do 5. So we get 5 charges on this guy, and then you do the same thing. You hit your blade tempo, and then you start hitting your 0 key. It's not very good single target damage, so be prepared. But that's what you're going to do. Is you're going to keep hitting your 0 key, which is still going to be all of your bleeds and such, but you'll have a couple single target abilities in that macro like we discussed before. So very simple to play. It is a 2-button spec. You're going to use your planar variation off cooldown again here, but very easy to play. Really awesome for trash clearing. So, but I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to hit me up at Clip2Cupto at Deepwood or Callus at Deepwood. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.